and plus traveling the world, and you know, going to Africa was kind of another big storyteller here. Is everyone was coming up to us, and it's like, we got the most beautiful land and the most beautiful water, which, you know, in the world, which everyone, anywhere you go, everyone tells you that, right? We're the most sun, the most, you know, beautiful land, the best soil, and the best water in the world, and no matter where you are, right? And it's like, well, you gotta respect that. You gotta have, you know, pride for your homeland. And we have a license, but we have no clue how to cultivate. We don't have any money, and we need an offtake agreement to even raise money.
Yep. That's pretty much, okay. That seems like the story everywhere.
Which is kind of frustrating, I guess.
So they're not allowing anybody in or out?
And no flights, no crossing the border, and no leaving the house except for Tuesdays and Thursdays between 1:30 and 3:30 for me.
2 hours, right? 2 days a week?
Yeah, so they split it up by males and females, essentially, right? Day by day, and then they give you a 2-hour period based off of the last number on your passport, right? So everything's shut down. There's a couple of grocery stores and like 700 pharmacies open, which is yeah, I don't know, it's frustrating, man. It's hard to like find good food, right? And it's I guess the quarantine's working. There's like 4 million people here in Panama. I think there's about 8,000 confirmed cases at this point. I believe there's only like 150 deaths that might have risen in the last week. I haven't checked in a while. So it's working in some way, shape, or form. But at the same time, like they're policing the streets really hard. They're everywhere, right? So it's kind of taking away a lot of your civil rights, which I don't like. But at the same time, it seems to be working. I don't know, man. It's really hard to tell. I hear the rest of the world starting to open up a little bit, talking to everyone, seeing pictures. And it seems like, once they've opened things up, everyone has just stormed to the beaches, stormed to the boardwalks, right? Stormed to the parks. So we'll actually see if Panama is making the right decision by holding on, if it actually works or not. So
I think a small country like that, same as New Zealand, they just locked it down, got rid of it, and then you can start to open up stuff because then there's not any cases. It's hard to tell right now. The U.S. is messed up.
Yeah.
But over here, it seems like it's almost back to normal. So they opened up all the bars and restaurants and all that kind of stuff. So that's all. Now it's like everybody's starting to go back to work.
Wow. Okay. Well, Australia has always been good about that. I mean, it's the hardest country to import and export out of anything, right? So they're very strict with their borders, and there's a reason for that, right? And it's probably what's helping, honestly, is that level of biosecurity that they're applying to the country, right? So.
And we don't have like the population isn't very densely packed. They have these cities, but there's not a whole bunch of people in them. So it's kind of spread out.
Exactly, man. Yeah, like 2.5 out of the 4 million people in Panama live here in the city, yeah. Right? So surprisingly, a majority of the cases are like right outside of the city, but it's kind of like the barrios where, I mean, the front, the front of the city here, the water line is beautiful, and it's built up, and it's almost like a Miami kind of, but then you go, 2 blocks off the shore, and it's just straight poverty, right? So
the closest I've been down there is Costa Rica, and you fly into San Jose, and it's kind of rough, but then you make it out to some of the beaches, and there's some really nice beach towns.
It's gorgeous. It's the same way here, right? I mean, the coast of Panama, there's so many beautiful places. Costa Rica it's more, I don't know. I'm a little biased right now with my feeling on the government because of the way they've quarantined and taken away my rights here. So there's a little bit of hate in my heart for it, but at the same time, you can't blame them. But yeah, Costa Rica is a little bit more, I don't know the right word I want to use here. Just I don't know, maybe a little bit more laid back, is the right way to put it. What is the major city in Costa Rica?
It's San Jose. San Jose. Yeah.
Okay. Trying to think. That's where you usually fly into, right? Yeah, man. But I will be getting out of here. I've enjoyed the last 2 years here, but I've kind of met my limit with what I can learn here, and moving on to the next one, man. So I'm excited about that.
So tell me, tell me a little bit about where you're originally from, and then I guess your journey to get to be in Panama in this industry, because I haven't met anybody else down in Panama in this industry, and we came across each other online. And so I'm super interested just to hear the backstory. I think you're originally from Florida.
Yeah, man. Born and raised in Florida. My dad worked for Disney World, so and I actually grew up right behind Magic Kingdom. To ride my bike. In the Magic Kingdom, we had passes, so we had full season passes. So I got a lot of Walt Disney did a lot of things to my mind when I was a kid, which I give a lot of my my good and bad sides, I guess, too, credit for. But then I went up to Connecticut, went to high school in Connecticut, out to the University of Colorado, study in Boulder, Colorado. And from there, I was there for about a decade. And I jumped into the industry at a dawn legality in Colorado. In about 2006 was when Amendment 64 hit, Amendment 64, and that passed medical law. And I was already in love with cannabis at that point in time. I remember there was an underground grower there growing potted gold, which was such a beautiful genetic. It yielded. It was easy to grow. It looked really pretty. One thing I guess the one downside I remember of it is that I just had so much of it at one point that it stopped working for me. You kind of built an immunity to it really quickly. But it was a beautiful cannabis strain. And when I first saw that garden, I kind of fell in love with the plant. Started growing in my own house, and as the laws started to change, I was able to jump right into it. Just basically, honestly, just kind of luck of this, pull the straw, and just lucky, But I walked into the first dispensary to open in Boulder, Colorado, Boulder County Caregivers, and I bought an eighth of Island Sweet Skunk. Right, and I hadn't had cannabis that quality or like Hawaiian genetic like that, and it absolutely blew my mind. I fell in love with it. I was like, I have to talk to the guy that's growing this. Let me understand what he's doing to make this so attractive. Basically, wouldn't leave until they let me talk to him. Worked my way into the back. We had a good conversation. By the time I left, he had, basically informed me that they were looking for, to basically scale a commercial garden, because it was still all kind of, everyone's kind of growing in their house. You could walk into dispensaries and sell them, quarter pounds over the counter that you grew in your basement at that point in time. The way the law existed, you could have 6, with a medical card, you could have 6 plants, 3 in flower, 3 in veg, and you could prescribe them to a caregiver. And there was no count on how many patients you could have as a caregiver. So that's how the laws operate, how you can kind of have your plant count.
What year was that?
It's 2006, 2007. I think it started to regulate even further going into 2008, 2009, where you actually had to have a storefront. But at that point in time, before the stores, I remember, you could go on Craigslist and look for cannabis, and you'd think you're going into a legitimate storefront. You'd see like a guy put up a beautiful ad, found his little website, put up, and I remember driving to a place and walking inside. It's this big warehouse. You open the front door, and there's a guy with a plastic fold-out table with like 3 jars of cannabis in the middle of like a 20,000 square foot warehouse, right? And he was selling cannabis out of it, but it was legal at the time, and the cannabis was really, really well. It's craft cannabis grown in a basement all at that point in time, so those were all really good. But yeah, with Boulder County or with Boulder County Caregivers, they were looking for a commercial garden. I happen to know a few individuals in the construction industry. It was really difficult at that time. I'm sure, you see emerging countries and I'm sure Australians that have gone into the industry have seen this as well, but it's hard to find a landlord that will let you grow cannabis in their building, right? It's a high risk for them with security, with the kind of the gray areas of the regulatory framework and kind of the shift of just the shifting framework that would happen snap of a finger. You didn't really kind of throw off your entire business plan any given day as things kind of developed. And so, I was really close with a gentleman who owned a business park out in Lafayette, Colorado, or a friend who was working for the gentleman, I should say. And we were able to really hook that dispensary with their first commercial garden. Like, he allowed them to come in and grow cannabis in it. And with that connection, we raised the money and set up right next to them and learned from them. Right, and it was a couple guys out of the mountains of the foothills of Boulder that have been doing it for 20, 30 years, and growing in pro mix, growing monster plants in pro mix, 1 per plant per light. Around 2-pound plants. And got to learn a lot from them, but at the same time we were able to set up our own garden, and what really kind of helped us get to a point where we could actually make real money moves was partnering with a doctor there. It was Dr. Boland. And at that point in time, to kind of pioneer the industry, you were taking on publicity, right? And you were taking on risk. There were a few that, got arrested, went on TV, talked about their projects. The police came in and shut them down, type of thing. But Dr. Boland was definitely heavily criticized. But we opened a clinic called Relax Clarity. And Relax Clarity was issuing medical cards, right? And he was one of the few doctors in the state that was actually doing it. Somewhat, it was legitimate, but at the same time, it was more so for the movement. You could go in there, and if you had back pains, you could get your card, or if your knee hurt, you could get your card. And some were legitimate, some were young college kids just trying to smoke cannabis legally, right? And it was about $300 per patient to come through. 100 went to operating costs, 100 went to Relax Clarity, 100 went to the doctor. And no one knew where to grow their own cannabis or how to, and where to source it. So they were prescribing our organization as their caregiver. So by the time I was 19 years old, I had a book this thick, like 500 profiles in it that had us listed as their caregiver, right? Which gave us the right to carry around, essentially, 2 ounces per card, and we could flower 3 plants per card with that paperwork and our name on it. So that kind of got us the ability where I opened up a 3,000 square foot garden. It was 30 lights and flower. We were learning how to do it. We've been doing it in the basement, but kind of getting into a large warehouse is a little bit of a different story. And first we tried building a room inside the warehouse, out of steel studs and Gorilla tarp, and vegging around the outside of it. And our first crop was just infested with everything, right? Spider mites, like we were learning aphids. We were vacuuming the spider mite webs off the colas, right? Because it was our first, we didn't know what we were doing. Oh my God, right? And I actually saw that happen quite a few times throughout Colorado, as people were learning how to deal with those insects and not really understanding what an IPM actually, how serious you actually had to take it. And so
I think you see that in any new market. You get a bunch of guys that are trying to get into the industry, and they just think they can grow this stuff because it's a weed, and then they're like, but that's a major pain point, is pests,
mildew, mold, all the above, man. Biosecurity and environmental controls, and really learning what it takes to replicate Mother Nature indoors. There's a curve to it, right? It's not necessarily easy, and it actually takes a lot more money than most expect to do it properly. There are some master growers out there that can, get away with, building a proper environment for relatively affordable cost. But when you get to a certain size of building, those jerry rigging tricks just don't hold up, right? So you actually got to invest in the proper machinery and infrastructure to get the job done. So it's kind of the school hard knocks, like I was telling you, man. Like we went through at one point we would try going to hydro, and I was growing in my Rockwell cubes and infested with aphids. right? To the point where like you take off the, the paper and it's just black aphids around the whole thing. We're like, oh my God, we have to save this crop. Like we need the money, right? What are we going to do? Well, we're going to take out each Rockwell cube. We're going to dip it in a 5-gallon bucket, which I'm writing a book called 5-Gallon Buckets, just because you can make anything out of a 5-gallon bucket if you really are a true cannabis grower and you've come from the bottom and had and not had all the tools you need. You can get a lot out of a 5-gallon bucket, right? And we're dipping it in a 5-gallon bucket with hydrogen peroxide, right, or H2O. We're scrubbing off the aphids with our own 2 hands, right, just to get to the point where just get them through the last couple of weeks, so we can get a viable crop out of it. And so it took a decade of getting infestations and having underdeveloped, underfunded infrastructure until it was, finally there was enough money being invested where like you could predict and set up preventative measure on a scale basis, right, to how you can keep these issues from occurring. Yeah, man. So that that was the first garden. It was pretty cool. High Times came in and did a full photo shoot. We hired a secretary. She actually won like Miss High Times, like 2007, I think July's issue. I don't know, I need to find it, right? So they came in, they did a photo shoot with her, like, in her bikini and whatnot in the garden. The genetics were awesome, right? We sourced straight from Amsterdam, everything that we could. I remember I went out to Amsterdam and smuggled them back in my socks, color-coded socks, right? My little key. But bubblegum, jelly bean, brown bomber, lemon sweet skunk. I mean, original OGs, Afghanis. I mean, the list goes on, right? And it was just really pure genetics, straight from the seed. It was a lot of fun to grow, which now you see all kind of hybrids of at this point in time, right? And we were going in soil. I was using advanced nutrients, basically because I was learning, right? And advanced does great things. I wouldn't hit on them. And if you're you can go some amazing weeds with advanced, but it's it's relatively expensive and it's not necessarily organic, and you get a lot of kind of the same terpene profiles out of that line. But eventually the law started to change, like 2008, 2009-ish. You had to have a dispensary, so we couldn't sell out the back of our car anymore. We couldn't take our product to just random storefronts and sell it over the counter to them. You had to have your own storefront. And I believe the law was that 70% of what you grew had to be sold through your own storefront, 30% could go to other stores in the country, or in the state, pardon me. And so we went out and partnered with, I believe it was Pure Medical Dispensary was the name of it, or Pure Medical Dispensary, and kind of took on, the management of their garden, as well as, while managing ours, and we're moving product to their front. And at that point in time, I actually ended up separating from that group and moving on to a different opportunity, which was awesome. It's 120 acres up in North Boulder. I'm sure anyone from the area knows this property. It's I haven't been there in a while. McElligans or something like that. I can't remember the name of the warehouse store up there, but it's 120 acres, and it's an old like missile engine, rocket engine testing facility, right? Like from like the 70s. So there was like a silo up there, right? And like a bunch of cement bunkers built into the foothills. And it was cool, man, because they were kind of hidden, right? And I'm talking about like maybe 100 different like cement rooms, right? Like in the mountains, like kind of buried into the mountains. And so I ended up becoming really close with the owner of the property who was purchasing it, who was into HVAC and mechanical businesses at the time. And he was making his way into the cannabis industry because it's a much needed service, right? And he already had, the team and business to kind of execute. And so he decided to kind of purchase the property and start building these rooms out like one by one by one. And that's where I came in, was able to go out and raise some money and kind of help with the project and consult on kind of and learn, right? And then build my own 2 hands, multiple different gardens. And that was a really fun experience. that organization ended up growing to a 52 licensed co-op, and was all kind of working together. By the time I left Colorado in 2016, and it was it was a good experience, man. Still right in the gray areas of the law, right? It was still medical. That wasn't very clear. They were back and forth on how many patients a caregiver could have, how much you could carry, all the above, right? And so you kind of push it here or there, but at the same time, no one was making a lot of money, right? 9 out of 10 of those, they handed out licenses like candy at the beginning, like a lot of these countries do. And so everyone went out and got their license, and then within 2 or 3 years, realized that the $100,000 they had wasn't enough at all to actually pursue the project, and they ran out of money, and so they were selling out, and so a lot of licenses were available on the market, and so that's kind of how that co-op started to rise, because with what little profits we had, we were purchasing licensure, which helped expand the network. And
those co-ops, did they end up becoming anything? Like, did they succeed? Do you know, or?
Not really. You know what happened is in 2014, like 3 months before Colorado released its recreational law, the DEA came in to the country, or state. I don't know, I'm in a different country now, but yeah, to the state, and raided about 12 different co-ops, and no one got arrested. I think there was one organization where they found the entire walls of the dispensary were filled with cash. They're hiding the cash in the wall. And I'm pretty sure that's the one organization that got the other 11 raided, because something was going on there. I'm not really sure any more detail, but
yeah.
But out of the other, out of the other 11, no one got arrested, but they came in, and at that point in time, I was working with the same organization, but working a garden down in Denver, and it was about 250 lights and flower, the HBSs, and the DEA comes in, guns drawn, puts everyone against the wall, right, and takes everything green, except for the cash in the cash drawer and the edibles behind the counter, which they didn't realize had cannabis in them at the time, which is pretty funny. But took everything green and burnt it. I burnt it in a big pile up in North Boulder. And it was kind of like their last, the way we took it was their last hurrah, kind of with these companies that kind of had a point of where they could really monopolize, like real money could be invested, into, they kind of wanted to prevent it from happening, I think. It's kind of how we saw it take place, especially since there was no real answers after it happened for anything. No one really understood why it took place on the scale that it did. So that actually kind of did set the co-op I was working with back. The owners there, and a lot of the decision makers had to essentially sell off a lot of the licensure because they couldn't operate like they wanted to. Because they lost millions of dollars in revenue worth of product, and they had to survive. But then they relocated me out to, before I went on. So after that, 2014 recreational hits, and I get hired on as a cultivation manager for a 60,000 square foot garden out in Denver, and that was I thought I learned a lot, but I was still in buildings that were ranging from 3 to 12,000 square feet at that point in time. Right, so now I'm in a 60,000 square foot building. There's 1,800 lights and flower, which is 8 flowering rooms, right? And completely underfunded, insanely underfunded. So I get there, and there's they hire on 30 guys, maybe 30, 40 guys, and it's all hand labor, right? So they didn't purchase us hoses. There was no irrigation system. There was no dehumidification system. There was no tables. There were no wall fans. There was mediocre HVAC. Basically, it was power and lights and a little bit of HVAC, right? Is what we had. Not even hoses. So we had 40-gallon trash cans on wheels, and we were filling out of the spigot and I had a line of guys, right? And 40-gallon trash cans on wheels, fill them up. I'm bartending, making the mixes for each room with shot glasses and everything is and they had pitchers, and one by one they'd come through and take the 40 gallons, and they're going and they're watering the plants. And this wasn't my decision. Believe me, I would have had it way different, but unfortunately, I wasn't in a position yet where I could make that decision. I was just doing my job, and they're pouring in their pitchers through the plants, and the water's coming out on the floor, and there's a team coming in behind them with vacuums, right, and vacuuming up the water off the floor. And the lights are like here, like so you're banging your head on the corners of these, like the sun system, the XXLs, which is just like you're bleeding, and it doesn't make any sense at all. And that was a real learning experience, because not only did we not have, all we had was water, nutrients, and lights, but there were also like 450 different genetics in the building, right? So it was we got to see so many different plants flower there, which was amazing. An amazing experience. And you really got to see, it really helped me learn where like the true hardy land race genetics could take on like the extreme environments, and where the super sensitive hybrids that need a particular inputs to accelerate their growth just couldn't take it, right? So you'd have one in every 3 plants just completely crapping out and dying on you, right? And then you'd have just a plant exploding for the sky. I mean, anyone who's been doing this sees it, right? And it was just there was no ability to implement any kind of standard operating procedure by which you could control what was going on, right? It was kind of a free for all. So that was cool. It was a lot of fun working with a bunch of really cool people. I learned a lot about managing people at that point in my career. I'd kind of been a sole writer, with a couple guys, and then have to manage one, just a couple friends getting the job done. And now I got 30 guys trying to, that are trying to, I'm learning from, and I'm trying to teach all at the same time. And it taught me a lot there. I'm grateful for that experience. And about, let's see, so that's going on into like 2015. Like at maybe at the end of 2015, they took me and they put me in a 12,000 square foot research and development facility, where I was basically studying the feed program for the company to help them really lock it down. And actually, to back up one step real quick, it was crazy because the 60,000 square footer without the dehu, I mean, you can imagine the humidity, right, and the water on the floor. You can imagine the powdery mildew problems. They hadn't outlawed Eagle 20 and Abbott yet, right? And so, these guys were wearing gloves. Again, not my decision. I would have never done this, but they're wearing gloves. Eagle 20 is going into the 40-gallon trash cans with the pitcher poured into the plant, right, like at least once or twice a week. And it's the only way to control the powdery mildew. That didn't last very long. Once the MMED, started doing the research and realizing what was safe and what wasn't, that didn't last long at all. But a lot of growers were using that to control pests and mildew. Yeah, so moving forward to the 12,000 square footer, that was really interesting. I got into the building. It was filthy, like disgustingly filthy. And I'm a little OCD. I mean, I'm like, my cannabis garden's got to be like a lab in many ways, right? And so I spent like a month cleaning. Right, first thing I did, right, and like every last surface got cleaned, scrubbed down, bleached, and it started to turn the garden around. That was really cool. That was actually a lot of fun because I was at a point now where I could make the decisions I wanted to make. I could bring the inputs I wanted to bring in. The garden was infested with a lot of different issues. And that's when I first actually, it was hemp russet mites. Drove me crazy there for a minute. I had no clue what they were, and I was dealing with kind of half-broken wall fans. Some of them worked, some of them didn't work, oscillate, right? And it looks like windburn for the hemp russets, right? And it really does. And so you think it's windburn. I go and change the fan, and I couldn't, and it would still like keep going and keep going. So I'm researching, and it really they hadn't blown up yet in the area. And I ended up finding an article that showed like the hemp russet mite was released, I believe, in California to fight the thistle. I believe I'm correct there. I'm not positive. I have to double check those facts. Like there's like thistle growing in the side of the road, like overtaking roads, and they released this pest to fight back the plant overtaking the roads, and it had worked its way obviously from genetics coming from California into Colorado. And so I at a point where I was like, maybe this is it, maybe it isn't. I'm taking leaf samples to every single grow store in Denver, around Colorado, saying, what is this? Asking the guys behind the counter. I can't figure it out. Do you have it? How can I get it done? How can you help me? Finally, I get to I can't remember the name of the storefront at this point in time, but the guy looks at it, he's like, he's like, put that in a bag right now. Don't bring that near me. They see the back, and he shows me hemp russet mites. And he's like, this is what it is, right? And he's like, let's go under the microscope. And we're looking, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like you can't see them. And the thing is with hemp russets is you don't know they're there until they're causing damage to the plant. By the time they're causing damage to the plant, the population is actually quite large, right? And it's not very easy to kill them off because you don't know where they are, because you can't see them.
Well, I saw the same thing kind of happen in Washington State as the industry started to open up and it was recreational. You saw salespeople showing up to these grow facilities and things like that. And the guys are jumping from one facility to the next, not knowing that they're bringing around stuff from that next facility. And the guys that are growing don't know not to put in controls to limit the access on these people. They're just touring them through these facilities and they're just bringing stuff with them.
Absolutely, man. You still see people doing it, and honestly, most people are going to do it until it happens to them, right? And the best way I can put it is like any farmer that has had Mother Nature to kill its crop, and their family doesn't eat for a year. You learn your lesson, right? And you're going to do everything you can possible to make sure that doesn't happen again. So part of what I'm doing now and being able, blessed of being able to learn all of these things is being able to learn and teach these people, hey, like I went through this and I don't want you to have to deal with it, right? Because it's going to hurt you really badly, right? When you walk into a room one morning and the entire crop is covered in powdery mildew from one overnight experience, and you're a week away from harvest, and it's a $250,000 crop, and you want to cry. Because a lot of work went in to get you to that point in time. You start to learn your lesson, and you start to become very strict about your biosecurity protocols, and what you're going to do to prevent that from even happening, or even the chance of it happening, right? Yeah, man. So the hemp russet was a pest that I learned to battle. Right when I'm starting to get kind of pest control, I had two assistants working for me. The company I was working for, and we're seeing the Canadian market go through this right now. So we're about 2 years into rec. Fired 40% of its staff, right? They were in a situation where they needed to cut down overhead, and the first to go is the general labor, essentially, right? So my two assistants got let go, and now I'm in 120 light, 12,000 square foot research and development facility by myself. And I have two green bros, trim machines, and hose, and one trough, and I'm working 18-hour days to keep the plants alive. Thank God I was allocated maybe one or two guys here or there to help with up pot, and maybe a good 5-person team to come in and help with harvest. But I had to get a good circadian rhythm on point where it's all right. I'm watering this room, I'm filling it up, I'm going to the trim machine, I'm filling the trim machine, I'm turning it on, right? I'm going to the other one, I'm emptying that trim machine, I'm putting it in the bucket, I'm opening the bucket, I'm going back, turning off the water, putting up the nutrients, turning on the mixer, go back to the trim machine, right? And so I'm trimming weed while watering cannabis, while at the same time going in and plucking and doing canopy work and plant work. You get very good at just, utilizing, every last step and motion and movement towards something that's going to progress you. Other words, you fall behind, and once you start falling behind, it just starts to stack upon each other, and then you get issues really quickly. So that was another really good learning experience for me. Learning how to run 120 lights by myself without automatic irrigation. which now I see is extremely important, the fertigation process, because if I had fertigation, that job I could have done 120 lights by myself, no problem. It would have been very easy. But without fertigation, it made it much more difficult. Yeah, and at the same time, I still had access to all these beautiful genetics. So now I'm going from 60,000 square foot, let's say 5,000 square foot rooms, maybe larger 8,000 square foot rooms, something like that, down to 20 by 20s, and I have all these access to these genetics that I've now watched flower for a year and a half, and I know kind of when to pick it out. I have to pick the ones I knew was good. I have to implement my own feed program, my own inputs, so I could hit my PK boosters, and I could implement my own biosecurity protocols. So very quickly, what I was able to do in my basement, I was able to translate to the 120 lighter, and grow some really nice cannabis, and I was still growing in Pro Mix at the time. I hadn't switched over to cocoa yet, just because it's where I transferred from, moving from soil and then learning organic soil, then kind of moving into to Pro Mix and amending my Pro Mix, and then even kind of moving out of amendments back into more salts, just because on a commercial scale it was a little bit easier for me to get the bigger results I wanted. And it was less work up front, getting them amending everything. And that was a good learning experience, man, until, that company, I finally got another offer, out on the West Coast. So I relocated, was relocated out to Washington State you're in, right, and helped build a tier 3 license down in Vancouver, Washington, just over the border from Portland. I'm gonna avoid saying names here just because I don't want to. I just want to keep everything level, right?
I understand.
And so that was a lot of fun. The Washington market is the hardest market in the world, in my opinion, to be successful at. I mean, you're dealing with 1,000 producers and 400 retailers, maybe even more gardens at that point in time. So it's really a buyer's market. If they didn't like your product, and even if they did like your product and the price point wasn't right, like, they were going to go to where they could get the better price point. And the uneducated consumer was coming in and shopping off of it was either one or the other. It was either we're buying the highest THC percentage flower we could find, or we were buying the prettiest package we could find, right? And fortunately, we were growing really high level flower, where actually our gorilla glue hit 36.5%. Everything kind of leveled out in like the high 20s there. But we're competing like the top 5% there, but we're watching our numbers kind of climb. And then there's a company, I will drop this name, Fat Panda. I mean, these guys are crushing up in Washington. You've seen them, right? But then they had beautiful artwork on their packages, and they had retrofit like an old prison. So they had awesome like media and stories. It was a really cool thing to watch them do. But they're mediocre. But their cannabis is coming in really mediocre, like mid teen percentiles, and not really pretty looking. And they were learning and building the infrastructure out. But their sales are increasing while we're sitting here with super high ends in a Ziploc baggie with a sticker on it, right? And they're sitting it with half the quality. And the quality is the wrong word. I mean, there's plenty of 15-16% strains. It comes down to entourage effect and all the above, right? Of the different phytocannabinoids that exist.
Who's the other one out there? Northwest Cannabis Producers, I think, or something like that. With really big guys.
Yeah, it's Northwest. Yeah, I don't think it might be Northwest Cannabis. Yeah,
something like that. There was a whole bunch of. There's so many producer processors. It was ridiculous.
Oh yeah, it's huge, and now you can buy up licenses in Washington right now for dirt cheap. Like, you don't get them 200, 300K, with infrastructure and like garden supply there, just because the guys can't compete.
Well, what are you going to do with it? You got to develop a name and build up that brand again, and then try to get it in retailers, and there's not that many retailers. It's just a pain in the butt.
It's extremely difficult. And not only that, but it's a 3-tiered tax system, just like alcohol, right? And so everything has to be packaged in the facility. Before it leaves the facility, we're ready for sale, right? Where in Colorado, we're putting big, beautiful jars on the shelf, and you're picking out your own buds, and you're smelling it, right? And all that. And so it's a completely different experience. I'm packing up, 5-pound, packs and sending them to the storefront in Colorado, where now all of a sudden I got to put every single gram to the T with a sticker compliant on each package before it leaves the facility. And now it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, a whole nother process, which is like a whole nother vertical you got to take on, which, I'm thankful for the ability to learn it.
I was going to say, it's probably great to learn because, I mean, that's what's going to end up, that's how it's going to be in the long run.
It is the example. Exactly. Even though it's difficult, it's how, the taxing system is how it has to be, first of all, to generate revenue, which is good for the town or the jurisdiction, but it's also just for compliance issues. It does make more sense kind of when you get to international scale. You don't want, kilos of unmarked, cannabis kind of flying around. And also with health issues and medicinal cannabis and making sure it's clean, medicine for the people in many ways. So, that was a learning experience. It was pretty cool. The owner there was able to get a multi-pond packaging machine from the German company, which had like 14 scale head on it, right? They're on, essentially as a demo. We didn't have to pay for it. So it was built for gummy bears. And so we were playing around with it, and it was a cool experience. It really wasn't able to get dialed in via the computer system 100%, and we didn't have the full automated line where it was, filling underneath. So it was like click a button and you're someone standing there with the jar, and like it falls down. But there's 14 heads, so it's like, and it got to a point where like there were so many feedbacks, because when you got down to grams, which is a lot of the Washington market wanted gram bags, which I hate it as a producer. I had to buy an eighth, but a lot of people wanted to buy the gram before they bought the eighth, kind of thing, right? And it actually came down to, when we start crunching numbers, it was actually quicker to package hands by gram, or grams by hand, pardon me, than it was with a machine. But when you get them to larger amounts and you're dealing with even larger scale operations, then you need a machine like that. I mean, you don't want to have 30 people, 50 people sitting there packaging for you. You need to have the right automated line in place. So let me finish up my I'll stop with my long monologue here. But yeah, so work with that garden, was there for about 1.5 years as head of cultivation. When I got there, the grower in place had sourced 180 genetics off the Seattle clone market, and it brought every pest, mildew, and mold invasive to the area into the building. And there was no preventative scales being issued, which is one of the reasons that me and my team was there. And it was bad. I'm talking like blacked out yellow cards, and a yellow card on every plant, right? Completely black, filled with gnats and aphids. Surprisingly, the powdery mildew, I didn't battle that bad in that building, even though I'm up in the Northwest, which is way wetter than Colorado, and it was all over Colorado. So I was a little confused about that, but it's systemic. So maybe it just wasn't in the genetics that we had brought it in. But that was a serious mental battle, because the guy, the guy that kind of was the facility manager, was learning also, and it was everyone's up and learning there, and we got there by which the business had already started, and he hired the first 30 people to come to the door, just straight up like, hey, yeah, okay, come work, right? And as you guys know, the cannabis industry is filled with a lot of misfits and hooligans, and I'm not saying they're not intellectual and smart and awesome people, but they're kind of they kind of want to go work in the cannabis industry because they're not happy in any other industry in many ways, right?
It's an eclectic crowd for sure.
Exactly. So, I'm dealing with 30 people that have never grown cannabis before. They're somewhat misfits in their own way, shape, or form. Not that I'm not one myself, right? And became a therapist at that point in time, dealing with the ability to kind of teach these people and keep my own head cool with trying to teach a bunch of newbies how to water and not only that, but dealing with the infestations that were in place. So it took. I knew how to battle a majority of pests at that point in time with a series of organic oils, I was able to get the fungus gnats under control. I was able to get, any kind of mite. There were russets, there were spiders. I was able to get all those under control because I kind of dealt with them. The aphids I dealt with in the past, but it was in rockwool cubes, and they were much easier to get rid of in the rockwool, I guess you should say, because I could be more hands-on with it. But we were growing in cocoa at this point in time, and I could not get rid of the aphids, man. They're alien. What are they birth 6 pregnant babies every 3 days, right? Or maybe every week. Can't remember their exact life cycle span at this point, but they're birthing. It's alien stuff, right? They're birthing pregnant children. So it's they exponentially take over very, very, very quickly if you don't get rid of them. And they're in your root zone, so you have to you have to pour directly into your roots. So it's it's a game essentially. And I went through a series of treatment programs until finally I brought an entomologist, because I was like, I need help. I need more professional help here. I've done everything I can. And she was amazing. A woman's name is Mariah Chappell. I recommend her if anyone needs entomology work. She taught me so much. And she got me on point with with pest control, right, and more biowarfare type applications, as opposed to organic oils. And bringing in the nematodes destroyed fungus gnats overnight, right? That absolutely worked. There's more nematode. If you were to take the entire earth and remove all of the land, you could still see the shape of the earth if it was just nematodes. Right? That's how many there are on the planet, right? And so we were putting them in. That absolutely worked really well. I had canopy control on underpoint. And implemented a series of different predator mites to kind of create a halo. We had rover beetles hovering up above, and then we had Californicus and different series of predatory mites that live on different areas of the canopy, whether it be top, bottom, top of the soil, kind of protecting it. And I could not get rid of these aphids. It took a year. I lost sleep. I lost sleep over battling an aphid infestation. Anyone in the right mind would have come into this garden and been like, cut it down, clean everything out, and start over. But we have 30, 40, 50 people working for us. Everyone needs to get paid. It wasn't an option. Cutting down the bill, starting over wasn't an option. We had to keep it going. And so implementing biosecurity protocols, getting biowarfare on place, and finally I got into nanoparticulates, right, which is essentially breaking it down to a point by which it becomes systemic and it can be absorbed by the plant, right? And I started playing with different plant-based nanoparticulates, specifically rosemary, right? And so rosmaric acid, right? And so rosmaric acid is actually uptaken by the plant, and it repels pests, and it's got a 30-day half-life. So I was able to implement a rosmaric acid into the veg program, which basically repelled the aphids, and it was out of the plant by the time we're harvesting, so there was no issues at all. And that was the final click that got to the point where I'm a year into this, and I've gone from 180 genetics down to the 20 genetics that should only be in the building, and I'm on the pests are gone, right? And finally, and that's when the crops, when I got there, the guy was doing a pound per light, and that's when I started to see the numbers dramatically rise until about 18 months in, we were doing 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 pounds per light. And then I hit my max ceiling again in that facility, right? And it's just going back to, guys, put your money into your garden. If you want to invest in the cultivation, put at least half the money you raise straight into the infrastructure of your garden, right? And it's just got to be there, because you're going to run into these issues if you don't. There was no DQ still, not enough at least, right? So once you start to get to that kind of biomass inside, there's a lot of transpiration going on. Your VPD starts to kind of run in different directions. I start to run into issues, hermaphroditing issues, right, with unstable genetics, with different humidity and temperature swings. And I was outgrowing the facility. There wasn't enough DQ to handle the amount of biomass that's going on. So what's the next step? Well, these guys actually, the three alike guys, right? Okay, well, I gotta eliminate the biomass inside these rooms, right, to keep the dehumidification down. Went into stripping the plants, right? So now we're experimenting with stripping, defoliation. That's what I'm saying. And it's a really interesting process. I recommend anyone who's dealing with high humidity issues to try it. But after you learn it, and it's specific per genetic, per environment, and you get good at it, and your timing's right, and you can stack your internal stacking, right? You're removing defoliation. You begin to learn that a family is really only good for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, it's either blocking a node site or it's basically using energy that doesn't need to be used anymore. It's using more energy than it's creating in many ways, right? Because it's not getting the light it needs. It's on the lower part of the plant, right? So that's why you're cleaning, you're shaving your legs up. But it also kind of stunts the plants in a good way when it comes to like sativas. Like we got sativas, they're stretching too high, and you strip all of those fan leaves off, it'll stunt, and those node sites will sit where they're at as opposed to stretching through week 3, right? And believe it or not, it actually pushes the plant. It's kind of a stress technique to swell bigger and faster, because now it's like, oh, I need to produce more green because I have this beautiful root zone, right? And so I need more photosynthesis, I need more chlorophyll, I need more green. And so it pushes the plant to grow bigger, faster, and you actually see positive results out of it, but there's strategy to it. You can also be negative if it's not done right, right? So that was a pretty cool experience. I'm gonna stop giving away all my little trade secrets here. Let's move on. So I'm in Vancouver, there for a year and a half, and got headhunted by an international cannabis consulting firm and relocated down here to Panama City, Panama. This firm was kind of heavily based on regulatory compliance, and I felt blessed and honored. Honestly, I felt extremely underqualified when I got the job, and was thinking like, how the heck are they going to pick me, just a farmer out of a garden, to go teach people around the world how to be compliant with cannabis, right? And little did I know that after getting out here and traveling the world, that in the last 15 years of knowledge that I'd gathered just from being hands-on with the plant myself would held extreme value. Like, I'm speaking my mind, and people are like, "Oh my God, he's genius." I'm like, "No, I'm a stoner out of the garden that's just been seeing this, and this is just natural for me, right?" And like, so that was a pretty eye-opening experience to see how the emerging markets can really be beneficial to those that have come, from a cannabis culture background, actually, put in the time and the hours and the hundreds of thousands of hours to actually master the art of the plant. And that gave me kind of a whole new vision and respect for the industry and for the plant itself. And I've been down here in Panama now for 2 years. Working for this company. It was also technology based, building ERP and compliant software systems, building vertical aeroponic habitats, 300 cubic foot habitats, fully automated on vertical racking, 3 high, 5 long, 10 military grade sensors with HVAC, LED, air purification, and aeroponic 80 micronized mixture root zones, all automated to an ERP grow front.
So why Panama?
Yeah, pardon me guys, here's Sunday night having my beer. But yeah, I don't know why I'm saying you guys. I'm talking to you, Josh, on my bad. I guess my dog's listening too. So the Panama, let's see here. It's the belly button of the Americas, logistics capital. I can see the Panama Canal out of my porch here. There's 93 banks, international banks. So, doing international kind of cannabis commerce was the goal here, even though it kind of backfired on the company I was working for down here, because the Panama Papers movie just came out and kind of uncovered all of kind of what was going on with the banking systems down here. And also is tax-free haven, right? So we were able to set up in a tax-free zone for doing commerce. So that
Is it legal for? Is it medically legal? What's the legality of it there?
no legal cannabis here. So
Oh,
we did, you know, the company I was working for down here did help write a version of the law, or at least, you know, put its 2 cents in. It actually a lot of work into it, and it's gone through like second debates. There's been, you know, it's in the process of coming online. COVID's kind of slowed it down. I think November is when it went through its second debate of last year, and since then it's just kind of been on hold. But it was more so for the first three attributes, because where you know, we had multiple clients around the world. You know, I see 21 contracted clients that I've been consulting for over the last 2 years, and all over the world, right? And it was a lot of fun. But yeah, but more so tax free, the ability to kind of move money, and the fact that we were in a logistics hub was the reasoning why my CEO set up shop down here.
because I, in my mind right now, I see that potentially as a place, if it was legal to house and store physical product, it'd be a perfect place to have a place where you could send samples to and hold those, and logistically around the world start to send those shipments off as almost
The hub, yeah.
almost a hub.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Exactly. I definitely see the vision of the ability to be able to do that, but there are ways away from being there, right? There still needs to be, you know, the laws haven't gotten to a place where you can even apply for licenses, and there's going to be years of them figuring out how to regulate, and then years of people figuring out how to even cultivate, or, you know, it's going to take some time here. Still a few years away from actually happening. Unlike Colombia, where, it's experienced cultivators everywhere there, so it was able to go like that, and the laws were somewhat lax there, relatively, so everyone kind of jump in. Here it's there's not as much agribusiness here. A lot of Panama does a lot of import, right? And most of their goods are imported. I expect it to be cheaper living here, honestly, but it's really not compared to America, because everything's imported. There's extra cost to it. And yeah, I mean, I love it. It's a beautiful place. They got Bocas del Toros and San Blas. We got the islands, and the and I'm in Isbeth, and I can be in the Pacific Ocean, and an hour later be in the Caribbean Ocean, and I get to watch. I can see a cruise ship sitting out there getting ready to go through the canal. So it's a beautiful place. But I'm personally ready to move on. I've been loving moving Spanish, but I'm kind of a nomad in my own way, shape, or form. So I'm ready to go on to the next one. It's kind of how I've been, a year and a half, 2 years at a time, all right, and moving on. So, yeah, and that's where I'm at, man. So
what's the next step? So you've come all this way. You've worked your way through the industry, pretty much in the big name places. Colorado, California was the other one. But besides California, it was really Colorado and Washington were those first movers in the rec.
I started in Oregon. I did build a garden in California at one point in time, down in San Diego. But basically, a lot of my experience came out of Colorado, and I really learned, more management, and I really mastered the commercial skills in Washington that I was learning in Colorado, is the best way I can put it.
And then you started to emerge on the international scene. You've dealt with relations over here in Australia, all over the world. From my understanding, you put me in touch with a lot of people from Israel to Europe to Australia and beyond. So, I mean, what's your next step in this process? Where are you headed from here?
Yeah, man. So I've left the company I was working for down here, and my network was just starting to outgrow theirs, honestly. And and I've kind of relaunched. I've always had my own consulting firm, Headie Horticulture, and I've relaunched it as HH Global Alliance, and hired on some of my best friends, some of the best cultivators that I know, and as my directors, and and utilizing, and leveraging the network that I've built to help build an ecosystem of like-minded individuals that can all, help each other in different aspects and verticals of the industry. And it's a beautiful thing. Like I feel blessed because I'm waking up every day. I'm getting to make the decisions I want to make. I'm having phone calls with really intellectual people that are either bringing enlightenment to me or I'm able to enlighten them in some way, shape, or form. So it's a good feeling. There's lots of laughter. There's lots of happiness, and we're pioneering in emerging industries. And even though the launch of my own firm here is that been right as COVID started, it hasn't slowed us down. It's actually kind of helped. I think, as I'm sure most cannabis businesses know, the industry cannabis industry has been thriving during COVID. At least I know the States, anyone I'm talking to, they're selling out. The garden that we built in Washington is all the crops are pre-bought at this point in time, right? I mean, they're renting square footage for the deal, the grams coming out of that square footage the dispensaries are. Also the quality is really high there. I mean, we did a good job of getting that set up so it could maintain itself. But it's been a cool experience, man. So now I'm launched my consulting firm. We're doing
What's the focus of that firm? Like, what are you guys trying to accomplish with that?
Yeah, Josh, it's taking what I've learned, especially over the last 2 years, doing international cannabis commerce, and in some way, shape, or form, I've got my MBA in it, even though it's my own MBA, my own self-titled MBA, but it's kind of watching where others have failed, right? And as I learned and seeing where others succeeded on a smaller scale and not necessarily an international scale. No one's really doing it super successfully yet. Even the big names, the big stocks are failing right now and are losing money. So it really comes down to creating integrity and eloquence within the supply chain. Our business plan really focuses on reverse engineering that supply chain. I know for a fact, because I've crunched the numbers over and over and over again and done it with my own two hands, that all of the overhead is in cultivation, right? And it's expensive. That's where all your overhead is, right? And even getting to a point now where extraction, even though there is less overhead, it really comes down to the fact: do you have a place to sell the product? And it was like, out in Washington, it was like. At one point in Washington, when outdoor California would come in and flood the market, right, during Croptober, a price of 30% testing Gorilla Glue 4 was going for $2.66 a gram just to move it, right, just to generate cash flow. And down here in Panama, one of those grams cost $30, right? It really, that was another big kind of key stepping point. And plus traveling the world and going to Africa was kind of another big telling storyteller here is everyone was coming up to us, and it's like, we got the most beautiful land, the most beautiful water, which, in the world, which everyone, anywhere you go, everyone tells you that, right? The most sun, the most, beautiful land, the best soil, and the best water in the world, and no matter where you are, right? And it's like, well, you got to respect that. You got to have, pride for your homeland. And we have a license, but we have no clue how to cultivate. We don't have any money, and we need an offtake agreement to even raise money.
Yep. That's pretty much, okay. That seems like the story everywhere. That's everywhere. Yeah.
At this point in time, it's either, do you want 50 gallons of fucking, pardon me, my French. Do you want 50 gallons of CBD oil, right? Ready to go. It came off the fields of China and no one knows where to move it, right? Or we need an offtake agreement because we can't raise the money, and we realize that. At least they're smart enough to realize that. But the reality of the situation is, no one's going to sign a piece of paper that says if you raise money, then at this point in time, if you're successful, that you might hit a production line that might produce at this rate. So in a year and a half, 2 years from now, we will buy it from you at this price. If it was me signing that piece of paper, I would undercut the market tenfold. right? And if they want to take, okay, here's your offtake, but I'm only purchasing it for this price a year and a half from now, right? If you want me to do this, so it just doesn't exist. It doesn't make sense. Like, really, it comes down to building relationships, building networks, building trust, building the network to have multiple different outlets for your product, knowing that when you do release that production line and you do have a date set by which that product can enter the market, that there's plenty of options to take it. And that's what brings security to your business plan. And because at that point in time, when you launch operations and you can say, I'll have this product ready on this date for you, that's when the piece of paper gets signed, you get your offtake agreement. And the investors have to realize that.
But I think most organizations right now are building it, producing it, they get it to a point, and then they start to think about that last step, which they should start thinking about at the very beginning.
Which is exactly what my organization does, right? It's reverse engineering the supply chain, right? So, we're gonna go out and we're gonna help you develop those supply offtake agreements. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna white label off of people that are already doing it, right? And we're gonna get your brand out there, and we're gonna get you into get you into revenue to help you raise the money for your project, because now you are in revenue, one, which is a big kicker, and two, you have already shown that you can sell and have places to sell the product, right? And as you build.
So how are you going about partnering or integrating your business into these other operations? Because they're not physically your own operations, you're just help consulting, or how are you positioned with that? Or do you sell them supplies, or how does that work?
Yeah, every case is a little bit different, right? I mean, we're really, we're able to, our organization is, direct to manufacturers all over the world, just because of the years and years and years of cutting out the middleman. So the ability to supply garden supply and supply biomass and final product production material white labeled directly from manufacturer to distributor with us being the only middleman is a huge key point for us, because it helps us into the market with the best prices and undercut most. But yeah, it's basically building accreditation, right? Which is a huge part of the industry right now. And everyone's seeing it. I know Australia is a big fan of accreditation when it comes to the cannabis industry, right? And it's, moving from GAC to GMP to GDP, and being able to kind of tell that entire storyline, and whether or not you own the entire vertical or the entire chain, or if you own just a part of that chain, just one of the verticals, at least you have the network that is taking care of the other accreditations to complete the chain, so that you can get that product to the European market, essentially, which is held to highest standards, right? With ease, right? And get paid for it, because you have the accreditation. People are going to pay you because the credentials are there, right? It's the best way I can put it is I'm just going to finish this thought. You got to get bypass heart surgery, right? Let's say, and you have, and you need to go get, you need to go to a physician, see a doctor. Are you going to go to the doctor that has the $10,000 solution, or are you going to go to the doctor that has the $100,000 solution, right? And reality is, most people, if they can afford it, are going to go to the doctor who have the $100,000 solution. Why does he have the $100,000 solution? Because he's got the credentials, he's got the tools, he's got the fundamentals to actually mitigate variations of risk within the procedure and get the job done appropriately, right? That $10,000 doctor might have the tools, but who no one's accredited them. It's not there, right? So not to say that you can't take on that $10,000 doctor, but you're going to have issues afterwards you're going to have to deal with, because he didn't have the credentials to get the job done accordingly. And so you invest into that $100,000 doctor for a reason, and it's kind of the same thing. You're paying more for that product because it's got the accreditation to it, because it's done by people who are mitigating variations of risk and actually making sure it's clean production that's hitting the market.
The interesting thing to me is the need to source human resources like yourself from the North America market, where there is no real accreditation per se to the industry. There's there's guidelines and there's rules and regulations, but it seems like this international market has these accreditation, the GACP, the GMP, the EU GMP standards. that are set out from the pharmaceutical industry. But then you need human resources that have the 15 plus years of experience, of hands-on experience as well. So you need, it's like this mixing again from a black market or a gray market into a legal regulated market. And I just find that fascinating.
Mine, Joshua. Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, you go to Google and you type in international cannabis consulting, right? And you're going to go through the first 2 pages, and you're going to see a majority of these guys are lawyers that can get you these kind of certifications, know the laws, that maybe love cannabis, love smoking cannabis, see the value of the industry, want to pursue it, but in reality have never even grown it, maybe even never even seen a plant before. And they're all kind of compliance heavy, organizations, right, to help you get you there. But when push comes to shove, once you got your license, who's going to execute, right? And that's where people are running into issues. Now we have our license and we have this piece of land, right? But who's going to execute on raising the money and actually helping you get the job done, right? And that's where the cannabis cultured folk, like the people that I'm fortunate to be able to surround myself with, are here, right? We need the suits to go out there and help you get your compliant work. So I don't want to deal with that. And even though I'm learning about it, and somehow I've become a cannabis lawyer in financial analysis over the last 2 years when I should be in the garden. I'm not complaining, but it's just the evolution of my career. I'd rather be in the garden, right? And because that's what I'm best at. That's where I thrive. And so it's kind of a fine mix of being able to, network and build that international network circadian rhythm, right? To be able to complete the supply chain so that you can execute on all factors, as opposed to, we're going to get you your license. All right, you're allowed to go cannabis. Good luck, right? Type of scenario. So, I'm right on the same page as you, and so that's where we see value in what we're doing, is the ability to kind of back those lawyers and have those lawyers back us, and have them help take care of everyone stays in their lane and does what they're best at and what makes them feel good, and as long as you're creating a good environment where people can thrive, then you're going to be successful, right? And that's what it's all about. And I was here's another metaphor for you, a little philosophy. It's like building an urban garden inside a commercial kitchen inside an international bank filled with hooligans, misfits, and criminals, right? And you're trying to get to the safe and get out the front door without getting robbed, right? I mean, that's the regulations and like the guidelines that we have to follow in this industry, especially on an international scale, right? And it's so you have to have all those aspects brought together to be successful, and there's no such thing as a master grower anymore. It takes an ecosystem. It takes a team of devoted individuals and professionals to create that ecosystem, right?
Do you think that the international industry is going to run into the same problems that some of these individual states ran into, as far as control on a lot of the actual product and setting up that security to it? And then second of all, some places like oversupply on a global scale of product, like you do in these little micro situations within the individual states. So like in Washington State, you had this tremendous supply, but there real no outlet, not enough outlet to get it out to, and just pretty much just too much supply. Do you think that could happen again on the international?
Well, if we want to avoid that, that is one of the biggest, issues in anywhere that is a heavy supply, right? I mean, even, Oregon, 70, 80, 90% of the weed grown in Oregon is still going east, everyone, right? It's because there's not outlets in Oregon for them to move their product. Now, if we could do interstate commerce and we can move product from Mexico to California to Oregon to Washington to Canada, and and complete that whole line there, then product will move a lot more fluently. But even Canada right now, I can show you a beautiful chart that just shows inventory climbing year over year over year over year over year, and sales are just staying steady. And that's an issue with their ability to issue dispensary licenses and get people, 80-90% of the weed grown in Canada is still done on the gray black market. And I've been up there. You're walking into coffee shops and you're going behind the back. It's a beautiful dispensary, just like a legitimate storefront, but they're not licensed, right? Or you go online and you want to get your delivery, and it's beautiful and it looks like everything's legit, but they're not licensed, right? And it's because the government's hasn't really handled that appropriately yet to actually give the ability to offtake. And then at the same time, these big companies, went in and threw all their money into cultivation facilities that were somewhat, Aurora Sky is amazing. Like, some of these new greenhouses are amazing. They're figuring it out, but a huge overheads, huge costs. All their money went into cultivation, and they didn't have the biosecurity protocols to really create clean enough cannabis to meet these EU GMP standards. And they were expecting to be able to just go and hold and take down all of Italy. And all of a sudden they're failing, the product's failing when it gets to Italy because it was grown in a greenhouse that was open air eclectic, and there wasn't protocols put into place to keep, pathogens, pests, mold, disease, phytoplasms, mycotoxins from entering that product, right? Which is a major issue. So, I've been trying to change the nomenclature that's kind of been put into place by the North America and maybe the rest of the world, especially when it comes to the word hemp. I don't really like the word hemp because, really all it does is tells us that it's below 0.3% THC based off of a law, right? But in reality, there's commercial cannabis, right? And under that, there's industrial cannabis, there's medical cannabis, and then there's recreational cannabis, right? Hemp can be used for all three of those, right? It all depends on what your final product is you're taking to market. Now, if it's got to be under 0.3% to be legally run in a hemp, under hemp regulatory framework, right? But it doesn't mean you can't extract the other 112 cannabinoids out of the cannabis plant, right? And move it to international markets or move it, from state to state under hemp law, right? And that can be in a medicinal way, that can be in a recreational way, or you're just growing fibers, right, for industrial hemp, right? So I don't like that the word hemp and the word cannabis are being referred to as two different things. I don't like that at all. And I'm going to try not to conform to it because it doesn't make sense to me. No, you're good, man.
You're good. Keep on going.
So yeah, industrial hemp's grown for fibers. Recreational hemp is grown for oils and flowers. And medicinal hemp is grown for molecular weight, right? And really it comes down to molecular dynamics. And when you're taking these products to market and you want to figure out what their worth is and where your market share is, it does come down to the molecular weight when we're talking about pharmaceutical cannabis, right? And you have to have that, like we're talking about the CGMP certifications to move that product properly. But that molecular weight, the dynamics of it is really important to understand on how you're going to take market share, because we can have a flower that's testing at 20% THC and 1% CBG, let's say, and we isolate, right? And now what is that isolate worth as THC as it is for CBG, right? The CBG is worth 10, 20-fold. I'm actually using CBD and CBG at this point, but because THC is different because the way the regulations right now are in place, it still holds its value because it's not legal everywhere to move. But once it is, just like CBD, it's gonna become more of a commodity than expected, just because you can produce such high levels of it. It's taking those molecules, and now you have that deciphered value of that molecular weight based off the scarcity of that cannabinoid or that molecule or that terpene, that flavonoid, whatever it may be, and how you implement it into a final product for consumption. It sets the price point, right? And then the patient feedback that you get from that final product, basically deciphers the optimal, your ability to enter the market at a specific, a specific price point, essentially, right? So this is what I'm trying to get to. So,
who do you think is going to end up winning this war? All these big companies that have gone public in Canada and Australia and around the world that have entered into this industry. who do you see as coming out the other end on top? Because a lot of these guys are going to disappear and just not be able to sustain. They have lots of overheads. There's no market for them. Whatever it is, who's going to end up coming out the other end? Is it somebody that has a unique offering, or is it going to be the suppliers to those guys? Or
really good question, man. If I had to give an answer right now, it's going to be those that have the ability to isolate and distillate, molecules and get them into clinical studies and proven as legitimate as legitimate, not necessarily cures, because I don't think cannabis necessarily cures. I think cannabis opens up pathways for the body to cure itself. But it's whoever can get to the point where they're proving it as a medicine when it comes to pharmaceuticals. When it comes to recreational cannabis, it's going to be all about quality, right? The uneducated consumer is going to buy, maybe the cheapest, and there might be a product for that cheaper product or market for it, but it's not going to accelerate. In my mind, it comes down to craft cannabis, just like, and you see the craft breweries coming out of, everywhere essentially, right? And
California, Colorado, all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place, right? And that craft cannabis, being able to grow craft cannabis on a commercial scale, if you can master that art, there's nothing stopping you, right? You're gonna be very, very, very successful. If you're just growing mediocre cannabis just to pump out weight, then honestly you should be extracting it onto molecules and trying to make a medicine out of it, because I don't want to smoke it. And as people start to learn, they're going to learn that they rather pay the extra dollar for the flower that was grown to its optimal potential, essentially, right?
So it's really letting these regulated markets start to open up. And as that regulation opened up, you probably need to enter in at a well-positioned times and not have too much overhead. And then depending on that regulation in that country, you have to be well-positioned, whether it's a recreational or medical.
Well-positioned and not biting off more than you can chew, right? It's becoming successful at one, everyone's trying to become vertically integrated, but you need to master your vertical and become a professional, and everyone knows you for your vertical before moving on to the next one, because all of a sudden now your energy is getting spread out into multiple different areas and you can't focus on one, and now you have an entire chain that you have to control yourself, and if one of your verticals is weak, then it completely diminishes the chain. And when in reality, if everyone was just really good at their vertical and working together as a network, then it would be completely successful and everyone would be successful. But these big companies are trying to come in and take everything all at once, and it going all the way from inception to consumption is important, but you don't need to own it all. You maybe have a little piece of each of it because you're all working together. But owning the whole entire thing is just freaking selfish, in my opinion, and you're gonna fail, and your stock's gonna drop tenfold to right? So
that's the one thing I think you've been really good at, is just opening up channels, sharing resources, and just trying to make the industry work as a whole across the board. And so you've introduced me to quite a few people and been very open about that. I've been very thankful for that. And I think a lot of these guys are just trying to control everything. They're very limited on communication and opening up that dialogue. And I think they just need to, and if they want to succeed.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. I appreciate you thank you very much, brother. You've been the same to you, man. You've been really, really good at you've taught me a lot, honestly, over the last year and a half that we've been communicating. And I appreciate you for that, and I'm grateful for that. And I really look forward to coming out to Australia and working on some of the projects that we've been putting together. I think we're going to be able to do really good things for each other's network, and leverage and bring wealth to everyone involved, as long as everyone's holding their role, right? But yeah, you guys, it's you figure out what final product you want to make, figure out who's going to buy it, and work your way backwards, right? And at this point in time, the most profitable vertical in the industry is packaging and labeling final consumer ready products. Straight up. There's an oversupply of CBD. There's an oversupply of flower in most areas, except tea. Don't take THC. It's a different market right now, but I'm thinking more so of broad spectrums, right? And get that final product to market, create your offtakes, and then slowly work your way backwards through the verticals, improving your margins and rising your EBITDA, right? Because, as opposed now I'm purchasing my bulk oils. Now I'm extracting my own oils. Well, your margins are going to increase. Now you're not having that, but you're still purchasing flour. And then once you have enough money, you build your Ferrari of a cultivation facility where you can implement all of the protocols that are needed without the stress points, the extreme labor, to grow really high quality cannabis. But it's expensive to do that, but it doesn't, it's not a stress off the front, because that's not where you're putting all your money in trying to start your business. And in reality, you're not going to make any money for 4 or 5 years trying to do that on any kind of massive scale, especially on the international market. That's the best advice I can give from what I've learned. I'm still learning every day, and that's the best. That's why I feel blessed to be in this position. I love this job because I get the opportunity to learn every day, and it's a whole lot of fun. We're setting up operations in South Africa, and Japan, and I'll be coming out there and working with you in Australia, hopefully here sooner than later, and Peru, and here in Panama. And we're already working throughout the United States and Canada, so it's a lot of fun. The Global Alliance, I'm working with my best friends. We got an agent pool of about 30 like professionals that are just crushing it, like yourself, right? Highly, really networked and just specific values and skills. I love the fact that you've been able to just kind of bring the Australian market together right off the bat. It's really important, the work that you're doing, because an organization like yours didn't exist in Colorado for a very long time, at all. A very, very long time. Now it's a little bit different there because there was a long period of medical buildup to get to recreational cannabis, where it went rec in the capital. Is just the capital there?
Yeah, it's just ACT, which is the Australian Capital Territory, but that isn't really. There's no B2B market. It's just allowing you to grow your own plants and consume.
Right.
So that's still on its way, but I think places like New Zealand that are very closely associated with Australia will start to free that up. Here they are right now, and then Australia follows suit right behind that. So hopefully, right now it's going to go from a schedule CBD will go from a schedule 4 down to a 3, which will be you'll be able to go into a pharmacy and get that over the counter from your pharmacist instead of going to a doctor. And I think you're going to see that free up pretty quickly in this region. And then throughout some of the surrounding islands, you're starting to see a lot of that legislation start to free up as well. So I think Asia Pacific, it's not a huge market. It's going to take its time, but I think it's well positioned behind regulation. And that's what really Australia does best, is they love the rules and regulations here. It took me a while to get used to, but they'll succeed with the GMP certificates, the GACP things, and then that will be able to take that product around the world. You saw it here with the poppy seed and the way that that market came on board, and I think it's 70% of the world's opiates come from Tasmania, and so things like that. If it comes to regulation, Australia is really good at it, and so I think that's where they'll succeed.
Perfect correlation. It's really a beautiful correlation. I mean, for people to say that you can't grow outdoor cannabis and dose it out as medicine because of all the elements that can take it over and be dangerous for consumption. I mean, poppy's proof in the pudding, right? I mean, you extract it down to its purest form, you remove all impurities and pathogens, and you dose it out in a scientific method that's understood by producers, consumers, and the regulators that are governing its trade, right? And if you can do that successfully, there's nothing stopping you.
I think the government here, now that the opiates have kind of the sunlight has been shined on that industry. They're looking for something else to move into. So I think they're starting to get that message, and so they're standing behind the product. They're regulating it heavily, but they're opening it up at the same time.
Okay, yeah, I'm excited about it, man. What's, the way if I could predict the market right now, 2019 was the downfall for everyone. Anyone who could have held on, came into 2020. All of the producers and the retailers are doing really, really well, right? That are already in operation coming out of 2019 because everything's moving. As everyone sits home and smokes cannabis while working and not having to be in an office. And but as COVID starts to lift here, everyone who's been doing all their business development and due diligence over the last 6 months, the first 2 quarters this year, are going to start to really implement their plans. And I do see the market starting to rise going into 2021. And if you're well positioned by Q4, then you're going to catch that wave. Hopefully, if you put yourself in the right, at the right where the right swell is. And you're gonna ride it all the way to shore, right? And you're gonna be doing just fine. I think there's a lot of good things coming for the industry here. As long as you surround yourself with the right people, right? Because you got to weed out. That's really where I really pride. It's really what's gotten me to this point where I have people follow me around the world, and where I have people actually listening to what I have to say, which I never thought I'd have at this point in my life. Is straight up honesty, right? I mean, I'm gonna tell you even if you don't like it, and I'm gonna tell you even if I think it completely destroys your business plan or throws a wrench in your business plan. But I'm gonna tell you because it's honestly what I think, at least, or what the facts are telling me, right, based on what I've seen with my own 2 eyes, right, or heard. So, that's that, man. I'm happy, and I'm stoked. I'm stoked for what's coming. I can't wait till I can leave my apartment and go play on the beach. But life's good, man.
Well, that's good, man. I want to thank you again for coming on, giving us an intro to your past and where you come from and where everything's headed with you guys. Mack Lewis with Headie Horticulture, and we'll be catching up at sometime soon here on Thursday. We're pretty much always on the phone with one another. So, thank you.
Yes, sir. All right, brother. I appreciate you, man. Get some rest, and let's crush it this week.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, cheers.
Peace.